Hey everyone, thank you all so much for tuning in. Today we are going to be trying something a little different. I'm going to be trying a podcast style video, and I'm going to try to do this every Friday. I'm going to do it once a week. If you guys really like it, I'll do it multiple times a week. If you guys really don't like it, I can ease up and even stop if this segment just doesn't work. But I figured that this would be a good way for me to hurl out all of my thoughts on the game and film industry just every week, and that way if I don't have time to make more polished scripted videos throughout the week, you'll at least get to hear my thoughts at the end of the week. I do have some more scripted videos planned. I do have some analysis videos on specific games and films planned, but I just haven't had much time to talk about things on my YouTube channel as of late. I've been very busy with my full-time job, and there's a lot that I want to talk about. So hopefully this works as a compromise, and hopefully I can get a bit back in the groove of making regularly scheduled content as well. And please do let me know in the comments below if there are topics that you want me to go over, if there's things that you want me to discuss, and if you do enjoy this longer style of video, please be sure to leave a like below so that I can see that response and continue to make these if it gets a good reception. But let's go ahead and jump into the first topic of the day, which is Rocksteady's Suicide Squad game. This is something I've been meaning to talk about for a while, and it was just a difficult time because, again, I'm working full-time, I'm busy after work. I did record a video discussing the fake leaks that initially came out, but by the time I was going to post the video, another legitimate leak had come out, and so that video felt outdated. So I'm just going to discuss the whole situation right now instead. So I believe that it was actually around last weekend that this all went down. I could be mistaken, but it's been about a week or two that this information has been out. But essentially what happened is we got a very fake story leak for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. We actually had a former Rocksteady employee on Twitter who confirmed that the studio is laughing at these fake leaks and deconfirmed any legitimacy to them. And if you read it, it is pretty clear that this is a fake leak. It's something that pretty much any middle schooler could have come up with if they know the lore of the Batman Arkham series and of some of the comics well enough. And this happens every few years where there's a pretty big leak on 4chan or Reddit regarding some fake upcoming Batman or Superman game from Rocksteady, and it outlines what all the side missions are going to be and everything that's going to happen in the main story and who the main villain's going to be. And it's like kind of always a bit egregious and unrealistic, but it's always funny to me just how many people fall for it. I always find a little bit of enjoyment in just scrolling through Twitter and seeing people actually believe that, like this particular leak said, that Rocksteady would actually have the gall to retcon Arkham City and Arkham Knight. Apparently at the end of the game, Flash is going to do some big Flashpoint thing that resets the timeline to right after Arkham Asylum, so only Arkham Asylum will be canon going forward. It's ridiculous, and it makes absolutely no sense. And that was just one of the many very ridiculous things in this leak. So I thought that those were actually quite funny, and that's what I'd made the initial video on. And then a day or two later, we got a leaked screenshot from the game showing that Suicide Squad has a battle pass. We got to see a level selection screen that allowed you to select your character, matchmake, and invite people to your server, customize your character, upgrade your character. There's a lot of upgrade points, it looks like. And the concern that rose up, I felt was understandable, but it's that this game feels very Avengers-ish. It looks like the launch screen from Avengers, and as anyone who has played superhero video games for a while, at least the last few years, knows, Avengers was not particularly well liked by the community, and so to see a Rocksteady game seem to be following in those footsteps is quite concerning. And I'm not going to lie to you, my heart sank a little bit when I saw this screenshot for the first time because it's absolutely not what I wanted to see. I wanted to see a screenshot of the Suicide Squad fighting the Flash or something, or seeing something that looked totally epic. I didn't want to see this very games as a service looking battle pass confirmation, and that is disappointing. With that being said, I do think a lot of people are jumping to conclusions too quickly. I feel like people are throwing shade at the wrong people. A lot of people seem to be jumping on this bandwagon of like, the devs suck, the developers of these games don't know how to make games anymore. But it's really interesting because, especially coming right off of Gotham Knights, it's pretty clear to me that these aren't mechanics that these developers are overly passionate about putting into their game. It's actually something that one of the Warner Brothers Games Montreal developers was putting on Twitter, and I had a little bit of a back and forth with him just discussing this. But his point was, if you want to understand why every game looks the same these days, take a look at like the top 10 best-selling games of the last few years. And what you see is like Red Dead Redemption 2, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Fortnite is like a super profitable game. And so obviously when Warner Brothers sees that and they say, hey, we have the Batman IP, let's capitalize on the fact that it's the Batman IP and also that we can customize our gameplay model to match some of these really highly profitable games. And so that's why Gotham Knights didn't really resemble Arkham as much as Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and even games like Fortnite to an extent. You pair this up to comments that Warner Brothers have actually made regarding their games division in the last few years where they've mentioned that they wanted to go into more games as a service direction, and I just don't understand how you can really blame the developers. I doubt that Sefton Hill of Rocksteady walked in one day with a big smile on his face saying, I've got it, you guys. I know how we are going to perfect Suicide Squad. One word. Battlepass. I guarantee that was not a conversation. In fact, what probably happened was he probably got a call from someone at Warner Brothers or met with someone at Warner Brothers who said, you know what, this is a multiplayer game. We need it to have a battle pass. We need it to mirror some of the successful attributes of games like Call of Duty and Fortnite and all of these big popular games that are making tons of money. So I don't think that the hate toward the developers is deserved, and I also just need to be blunt and say I don't really think that there's enough to go off of to get concerned yet. Now, again, my heart did sink a bit when I saw this screenshot, but I took a deep breath, I took a walk, I touched a little bit of grass, and I felt a bit better. And I realized, especially after some more confirmation that an insider reported later regarding the truth behind this screenshot, this doesn't mean that this is a death sentence for the game. Basically, an insider who works closely with the production of the Suicide Squad team went on record, I'll link the article below. Basically, he said the Battle Pass is purely for cosmetics. It's purely for skins, and all of the upgrade points are experience tokens that you earn in the game, and it actually functions like Arkham Knight, where you start off with a very powerful, super-powered character, and then over the course of the game, you collect upgrade experience points, and you can upgrade your characters to ridiculously OP levels like you did in Arkham Knight with Batman. Another thing to remember is that this game already has confirmed fan favorite features that Avengers did not have. It has an open world metropolis and a story that can be played single player or with multiple people. I do think that when Avengers was ramping up its marketing, I think a lot of executives at Warner Brothers must have really been taken with that idea, because both Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad seem to try to be following in that trajectory. But when Avengers was as colossal of a failure as it was, it then seems like they went, oh crap, and went back to the studios and said, okay, you guys have to change it. It has to be more like Arkham and Insomniac's Spider-Man and, Assassin's Creed Odyssey and games like that are actually selling really well. And so then, unfortunately, that's not really how game development works. Like, if you don't have a really solid through line, then you're going to have a lot of compartmentalized features. That is honestly my conspiracy theory as to why Gotham Knights feels less like a cohesive game and more like 3 games trying to be a single experience. But even if that is the case, it's important to remember that Suicide Squad is a game that can be played single player or multiplayer. That wasn't a feature in the Batman Arkham games, and so a menu like this that allows you to team up with your friends, build out experience points in different areas of upgrades for your character, to me, it makes sense. Now, is it a little bit more hectic than I would like it to be? Does it look like there's too many glowing icons for me to collect around the city? Sure. With that being said, Spider-Man was not unlike this. You had to go collect crime tokens and research tokens and multiple different kinds of tokens in order to craft new suits. And knowing Rocksteady and knowing their instincts to create fantastic games, I'm more than willing to give them a chance. If I play this game and it suffers from just a very over-stylized or over-designed gameplay loop, I will be the first to acknowledge that and the first to criticize them for that. But I don't know that that's going to be the case. I think that Rocksteady has earned our trust at least a bit. And look, I'm not going to lie, it is a little disheartening as such a fan of Rocksteady to see how quickly people are turning on them, and there are people who have already made up their mind about this game based solely on this single leaked screenshot. There are people who now think that this game is going to be utter dog crap after this single screenshot, and unfortunately, people who have already made up their mind about this game will never be back on board, or at least very few of them. We've kind of gotten to this era where, as gamers, there's like a very high sense of entitlement. And a lot of times, once you, in your marketing, or if there's a leak that shows something that you weren't ready to show yet, if there is something that gamers feel that you are doing wrong, a lot of times those gamers will ever refuse to give your game a chance. Even if it's like one of the best games ever made, the fact that it has a battle pass attached to it, they will hold over this game's head forever. So I hope that enough people are willing to give this game a chance, recognize it's a game that is going to follow up the Batman Arkham games. It's a sequel to Arkham Knight. It's being made by some of the best in the business at crafting compelling gameplay, and I think that it at least deserves a chance, or even if not a full chance, if you're not sure if you want to spend $70 on a game with multiplayer battle pass mechanics, I understand, but maybe at least wait to see a legitimate gameplay demo from Rocksteady. Let them show us how the battle pass works and how all of the multiplayer and single player components and open world exploration tie into a cohesive experience. The next topic that I would like to discuss today is actually the state of Naughty Dog. We've recently gotten some statements from Neil Druckmann, the president, I believe, of Naughty Dog. He's also the director of The Last of Us, Uncharted 4, and The Last of Us Part 2, and he has made some remarks about the trajectory of the studio. Now, obviously, we know that their next project is the Last of Us Factions project, their big multiplayer Last of Us experience that was originally going to release alongside The Last of Us Part 2, but then blossomed into just a much bigger project that they decided to invest as a standalone title. But what's after that? We've heard rumors of The Last of Us Part 3, we've heard rumors of another Uncharted game. Well, Neil Druckmann has stepped in and said Last of Us Part 3 might or might not happen, and he has also said that there are not any plans or any intentions to make another Uncharted game ever at Naughty Dog. Now look, I always do think it's a little silly when game directors come out and say, yeah, that our studio is never going to make another one of those games, because 20 years from now, when there's kind of this renaissance or everyone's looking back on those old games and suddenly you're like, ooh, it would be a cool idea for a reboot of this series? Or even 5 or 10 years from now when, let's say, Neil Druckmann gets a better offer at another studio and decides to take it. And not that that's going to happen, but if it were to, then maybe the new director and president of Naughty Dog would say, hey, you know what, I'd really like to make Uncharted 5. Let's do it. Let's bring back Nathan Drake. Let's tell another story. So whether or not they'll actually stick to this notion of like, no, Uncharted will never be developed again at Naughty Dog. We've left our final brushstroke on it. That will remain to be seen within the next decade or two, but I do believe them that there are no intentions to continue forward with the Uncharted franchise at Naughty Dog, and here's the thing. I actually don't really think that's a big deal. We've actually already heard rumors of other studios at PlayStation potentially being interested in making their own Uncharted games. So this IP might shift to someone else, and if Naughty Dog isn't interested in making another one, they absolutely should not make another one. That is how you get cash grab and really soulless games, and a lot of times when you're playing a game, you can kind of feel whether or not there was tons of passion behind it, and to be honest with you, I don't think there is tons of passion in the notion of doing another Uncharted game at Naughty Dog right now. The other big thing that I want to point out is that playing Uncharted personally, and I don't know if I'm the only one who has this opinion, but I've never, since Uncharted 4, really been craving another one. I liked the Uncharted games. I think they're fun. I don't think they're like the greatest games ever made or anything, but I definitely think that Uncharted 2 was really revolutionary for its time. I think that Uncharted 4 did a great job showcasing the capabilities of the PlayStation 4, but by Uncharted 4, I did feel like the narrative was starting to get a bit thin. The thing with the Uncharted games is they didn't really do what The Last of Us really aimed to do, which was to really tell an emotionally complex story. Uncharted feels more like a cross between Indiana Jones and Mission Impossible. It has incredible set pieces to get through, it has some fun shooting mechanics, and it's a very basic gameplay loop. You solve some puzzles, you shoot some thugs, you search for treasure. The stories are quite simple. You have a love interest that Nathan is sort of having drama with, and he has his mentor Sully. It's a very familiar feeling story. It doesn't really tread new territory, but it does offer a really fun gameplay experience, and it did a great job of showcasing the potential of PlayStation exclusives from a technical standpoint. Additionally, the characters were really likable. Nolan North did a fantastic job as Nathan Drake, and so I have nothing but fond memories for those games. With that being said, the notion of Uncharted 5, I kind of look at that and shrug. Like, I wouldn't say no to one, but I'm also not craving it. I feel like my Uncharted itch has been scratched. It's not the same as, like, the Batman Arkham series, where if another Batman Arkham game was announced, I would lose my mind. Now, I get that there are probably some people who are opposite of me in that and would say, you know what? Rocksteady did great with the Arkham trilogy. I liked Arkham Origins, but I'm good. I don't need another one. But a new Uncharted game? Yeah, I would kill for a new Uncharted game. And I totally understand that this just comes down to taste and opinion, but I personally don't know what else I'd want to see in an Uncharted game. I feel like we've gone to a really nice variety of locations, had some nice variety in the MacGuffins that we're chasing down, the different treasures that we're trying to find. I feel like the characters had a nice arc. It's all wrapped up in a nice bow. We got our happy ending. I don't need another one. I know that there's this big push for we need games starring his daughter, but I don't really feel like that is something, again, that I'm chomping at the bit to see. I would honestly, if they did continue the Uncharted series, I'd want to see them try something a little bit different. I don't know exactly what that would be, but Uncharted 1 through 4, again, have very similar mechanics. They did improve upon them as time went on, and Uncharted 4 is a very well-designed game. But with that being said, like I mentioned earlier, there came a point with Uncharted 4 that I just felt like we had kind of reached the end of the rope with Uncharted. I like the games, but I feel like I'm satisfied with what we got. I don't feel like we need another full entry, at least not right away. If it ever does come back, I wouldn't be opposed to having a new studio take the reins and provide a fresh perspective on the IP. I also wouldn't be opposed to just seeing a spiritual successor. Ubisoft could bring back Prince of Persia as an Uncharted substitute, and I feel like that would scratch that Uncharted itch and be different enough to not feel like we're treading the same ground again. Actually, to be perfectly honest, I think that the bigger bombshell that Neil Druckmann dropped was the status of The Last of Us Part 3, because for a while we've heard these reports that he's come up with an outline with his other writer and that they have a mapped out Last of Us 3 storyline, and it seemed very possible that they were already working on it. But now Neil Druckmann is saying that The Last of Us Part 3 will only happen if they find the right story to tell. Now, Neil Druckmann is one of those guys that I wouldn't put it past him to be slightly dishonest about it. I wouldn't be surprised if just with The Last of Us on HBO and with the Factions game coming out, if he doesn't want to blow too much too soon with The Last of Us. And I think that if there was also a Last of Us Part 3 that we were looking forward to, people would start to experience a bit of fatigue and a bit of overload. And I feel like he's at a point right now where even if The Last of Us Part 3 is in active development and he's being a bit misleading about it, you wouldn't want to necessarily draw people's attention away from the show that has been very good so far on HBO Max, and you also wouldn't want to draw that attention away from the Factions game that is launching later this year. I also don't think that it's outside the realm of possibility that he's just being honest. I don't think that it is crazy to assume that Last of Us Part 3 is not a finalized deal yet. Now, clearly, The Last of Us is something that Neil Druckmann holds very precious to his heart. It's clear that that is his passion project and that is his baby, and it's clear that he wants to be a good steward over that IP. And I'm sure that there's some very complex emotions when you spend the better part of a decade working on a game like The Last of Us Part 2, and then especially when a good chunk of your fan base is just throwing backlash at you and really rejecting the game. Now, personally, I love The Last of Us Part 1. I think it's one of the greatest games ever made. It really pioneered the cinematic storytelling in the video game medium. It had really strong character development. It is one of the few games that has legitimately made me tear up and cry. I think that Ellie is one of the greatest characters in gaming. Now, when it came to The Last of Us Part 2, I actually responded to it very well when it came out. I think personally that it just resonated with the emotions that I was experiencing with COVID at the time, and it hit a lot of the right marks for me. Upon revisitation, there is a lot of really cool things about The Last of Us Part 2, but I do feel that the pacing of the game is abysmally slow. It is a very, very slow-paced game, and I think that sometimes that works, but generally speaking, I don't know that the concept and the thematic elements of the sequel were as complex as the first game, which was shorter than The Last of Us Part 2. I felt that the idea of revenge is bad, we're going to protest violence with violence, it works as an overall package, but I think on moment-to-moment gameplay, there's a lot of times where the pacing suffers, and it just feels very void of hope and joy. And I get it. That's not what they were going for. I get it. I'm just saying that the pacing, I think, suffered due to the nature of the game and the length of the game. I think that it is a technical marvel. The graphics of the game are astounding. There's some really awesome set pieces and some really awesome moments in true Naughty Dog fashion. I thought that Joel's death was actually handled quite well in the game, but my issues actually are more just with the pacing than anything else. Does there need to be a part 3? I don't think there has to be. But with that being said, I don't feel that The Last of Us Part 2 is the highest note to end the series on, and I don't know if it encapsulates the ending of this saga that was built up between the first game and the second game. If they do decide to make a Part 3, I actually think that they should try to reach the conclusion of this arc that they've built. Again, I think that Last of Us Part 2 leaves off on an appropriate ending for the series, but I don't feel like it's necessarily going out with a bang either, or on a super amazing moment of gaming. It kind of leaves off on a bit of a cliffhanger that could be followed through on in a sequel, or could not be. But I would not at all be opposed to seeing sort of a grand finale, a final third installment of this series. I don't personally need a game that a lot of people are requesting where it's about Joel and Tommy as hunters in the past. I don't need that. If they do a third one, I do want to see a continuation of Part 2. I'd like to see the conclusion of the trilogy, and then I don't know that we need another Last of Us game after that either. And it is another scenario where even if they have a strong outline for The Last of Us Part 3, if they don't have that 100% desire to continue this story, if they don't know that it needs to have a conclusion, if they like where they left it, I think they should leave it there. If The Last of Us Part 3 is a story that Neil Druckmann and the other writers and designers of Naughty Dog feel needs to be told, I will absolutely accept it and be excited to see how they conclude the story, but I don't, again, have that desire to play through another Last of Us Part 2 experience. I do think that they, in order to retain their fan base, would maybe need to go back to not necessarily safer territory, but a little bit more of what the themes of the original game were than the sequel. I think they'd need to go back to some of those complex decisions and ethical questions, as opposed to just, oh no, now Dina got murdered by someone and we're going to have a whole revenge plot there. I don't need a retread of The Last of Us Part 2, and I don't really need a retread of the first game either. I think that they both stand very well on their own, and I would like to see this world through a fresh lens if they do decide to revisit it with a Part 3. Now, the third and final topic that I would like to discuss today is Marvel's Avengers and the fate thereof. I was a little bit shocked at the news that was announced by Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics earlier this week, which is that Avengers is done. Avengers is no more. They will no longer continue to support the game after, I believe, March 31st. But not only that, it will no longer be available on digital retail stores. If you want to play Avengers from here on out, you'll need to have already purchased it digitally, or you'll need to get a physical copy. Now, I'm going to speak as someone who has actually developed a game, published it on Steam, and then had to pull it from Steam because the reception to it was so bad, and I was getting death threats over it. It's not because I was scamming anyone. It's a perfectly playable game. You can play through the game I developed, but just people really didn't like it. And it's really difficult because sometimes when you're making a game, you kind of forget to see the forest through the trees. And the reason I pulled the game from Steam was because it was clear to me that the game that I thought that I had made was not really the game that I had made. And the experience that people were having was not the intended one. And because the game was a pay-to-play game, it was, you had to pay $14 to play the game. It was not free, and it was a very difficult decision for me because it was something that I had worked on very hard and something that I was really excited about. And so to see it really get a very vitriolic response, it hurts. And that's a reason that you won't really hear me criticize developers, especially anyone personally, but even in a broader sense, generally, if I have a criticism with a game, I just state it as a criticism that I have with the game. I don't drag the devs into it. I don't call anyone stupid because I've been on the other end of that. And it is really damn hard to make a game, much less a game that people like and enjoy. And Avengers, to me, is another example of a game that very clearly had developers clashing with studio heads who wanted the game to, again, be more like a Fortnite or Destiny-style looter shooter games as a service project. And clearly the developers wanted to make more of an Arkham Spider-Man style game. And the result was very much a game that tried to do both and didn't quite hit the mark on either. As a single-player superhero game, Avengers is adequate. I had some fun playing through the story. After that, though, there's not an open world to really explore. There's not really collectibles worth experiencing unless you're really into loot and cosmetics, and I don't even think it changed your cosmetics. I think that you could upgrade your gear and you just had the exact same costume unless you went to the store and purchased skins that were like $15 a piece. And so very clearly there were aspects of this game that were not the developer's choice, but more, again, studio executives wanting to really profit off of a very profitable IP. But what we're starting to see, and this is something that I really hope these producers, publishers, executives are all seeing, is that it doesn't work. I believe Avengers lost $63 million. That is an insane amount of money to lose on a game that should have been a success no matter what it was. That game should have sold like hotcakes just because it had Avengers on the cover. Again, we're seeing Gotham Knights not report any of their sales figures 3 months after launch. It doesn't seem like they have any DLC. If they did, it seems like it's potentially been canceled, and that's not a good sign. I really hope that they don't keep trying to force developers into this corner where they have to push in mechanics to their game that really don't fit. I just want games that are true to the developer's vision, and I want executives to trust the instincts of these studios. Rocksteady, for example, if they'd wanted to make a Superman game, which is what the rumor was, let them make a damn Superman game. They would knock it out of the park. They know what they're doing. They know what they can achieve, and they understand the size of their team. They understand what they can and can't get away with in gameplay. Let them do what they want to do. I think that the micromanagement of these teams is honestly what hurts the games more than anything else. In terms of Avengers, I really do feel for the devs. Again, having been in a similar situation where I developed my own game and had to pull it due to a very vitriolic response, I think that really sucks, and it hurts to see this final nail in the coffin for Avengers. This project that a lot of people have dedicated years of their lives to creating that now won't even really have much of a legacy due to the fact that you won't really be able to buy a new copy anymore. I will say that that is an odd decision to me. I feel like even if they stopped supporting the game, they would still have a reason to keep the game up and available for purchase. I'm not quite sure why that decision is being made. Maybe they've said, and I'm just missing something from the article, but to me it feels more like a vote of a lack of confidence in this game. And after we've already seen the Guardians of the Galaxy game from Square Enix as well, it's clear to me that that is more the direction they will go if they continue to make Marvel games going forward rather than the Avengers style game. So it is good to see that they have already started to learn from those mistakes. I think Guardians of the Galaxy is a much better game than Avengers. Again, not because the devs are necessarily more talented, just because that studio seems like they were given more freedom to make the game that they actually wanted to make. And I think that had Crystal Dynamics been given full creative control over Avengers, I think we would have seen a much better game. They've proven themselves with the Tomb Raider games, and if they'd been able to really build out the kind of game they'd wanted to make, I think we could have had something really special on our hands for the Avengers IP. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the Avengers game as it stands right now, so the fact that they are going to make all the marketplace content free, I mean, good for me, I guess, because I didn't spend any money on this game other than just buying the base game on sale, so I guess I'll have all of the additional paid content for free going in on March 31st. I'll have to go in and just play the game and, see as a full package. Is it maybe a bit underrated? Has it really gotten quite a bit better over time? And are we just unnecessarily hating on it at this point? I don't know. I think that the marketing of the game didn't really do it any favors, and it's just unfortunate to see this be the result of Avengers. I think it had redeeming qualities. I also think it could have been a lot better, and I hope that we get another shot at the Avengers IP at some point in the superhero video game medium. I would love to see another studio, or even the same studio, take another crack at Avengers, just, again, not having to meet this games as a service style looter shooter game model. So that is a wrap on this first week of Week Wrap Up with me, Irogen. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below what you think about these topics, and if you have any topic requests for next week, I will take those into consideration as I decide what I want to discuss in the next podcast. But again, thank you all so much for watching. We will see you guys in the next one.